focus on citing considerations today. But first, we will do introductions because we like to do that, and an icebreaker. That's me. All right. So introductions, and what we'll do just to make it simpler is I'll call people out so we don't jump all over each other and tell people who's on deck. So your name, that should say city or organization. And then Chris had this really nice icebreaker about, like, you know, if you had one more week of summer, what would you do? And I just had to change that because I just wanted to know who turned their heat on. Don't lie. Tell us who turned their heat on, and then, you know, of course, winter and September. Wake Me Up When September Ends, Renee song, one of my favorite songs. So I'll start. Diana, I direct the Metro region of CERTS with the Great Plains Institute, and I did, in fact, yesterday turn on my heat because my 15-year-old begged me to. She was cold, and it was her second day back at school, and she really wanted the heat on. So this energy-efficient lady turned her heat on September 9th. We'll have Melissa Bartman go next, and then Tim, you are on deck.
Good morning, everyone. This is Melissa Bartman with the City of Red Wing, and I have not turned our heat on yet. Was close, but not yet.
All right, Tim Kiefer and then Caitlin.
Hi, Tim Kiefer, City of Golden Valley Public Works. I did turn my heat on because I have 3 little kids at home.
Fair. Caitlin and then Drew.
Hi, this is Caitlin. Yes, we turned our heat on Monday afternoon. It was not me, it was my husband. So I take, apparently it was colder upstairs and it was in the basement, surprisingly. But I did turn my space heater on down here just before this meeting because it's colder.
All right, Drew and then Anne.
Hello, Drew Ingvelson, City of Minnetonka. I have not turned here, but similar to our last person, my wife did turn it on for a little bit, unbeknownst to me. So we have not had on since, though.
All right, Anne and then Noah.
Hi, Ann Reich with Marine on St. Croix, volunteer for the Green Stuff Committee. I'm wearing a wool sweater, but indeed we did turn our heat on this morning. It was 35 on our thermometer, so it seemed not inappropriate.
Right.
Hi, I'm Noah Silver, City of Edina, electrical HVAC supervisor, and I did turn on my heat under protest. Keep the family happy.
Same. All right, Brandy and then Chris.
So since it got down to 28, even though I'm accused of living in an igloo, I did turn the heat, I turned on the air source heat pump, caveat, and to a balmy 62.
There you go. So Chris and then Leslie.
Hi everyone, my name is Chris Acuna and I'm with Great Plains Institute. I have not turned our heat on. I like it when it's cold in the house. My girlfriend from California does not like it, but she also likes not turning on the heat as long as possible, so it works out.
All right, so Leslie, then Tom.
I'm Leslie McKenzie from, I'm a volunteer in Marine on St. Croix, and we closed the windows, but we haven't turned the heat on.
Fair. So Tom and then Reese.
Hi everyone, Tom, City of St. Louis Park. Nope, no heat as of yet, but I have been thinking about it, especially this morning.
Mm-hmm. Okay, is it? I always say it wrong. Is it Rissy or Reese? Reese from Edina, and then Emily. Nope. I think, oh, she's still there. Well, Emily, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, good morning, everyone. Emily, also with the City of St. Louis Park. We have not turned our heat on. We're holding out as long as possible. And also we have a Great Pyrenees. We actually have 2. So if somebody gets cold, I just say go find the dog and hug them.
That's right. Good, okay. Jen and then Dave.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Jen Hasbrook with the City of Eden Prairie, and yes, absolutely, I turned the heat on. My dog was cold. I was cold. I did it.
All right. Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Dave Wanberg with the City of Faribault, and I have not turned on the heat yet.
Good job. Let's see, where are we? Missy, are you there? All right, we'll go to Annie, and then S. Strain after that.
Did someone say my name? Sorry, I'm having technical difficulties.
We did. We were hoping that you would introduce yourself.
Oh, okay. My name is Reese Kareem. I work for the City of Edina, and I have not turned on my heat yet.
All right. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm Annie Patroff. I am a sustainability specialist at the City of St. Louis Park, and I actually turned my heat on about 5 minutes before this meeting because after wearing multiple layers of sweatshirts, I was still very cold this morning. So made the difficult decision to do it.
All right, S. Strain, I'm not sure who that is, and then John Howard. Oh, there you go.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So I'm Sarah Strain with the City of Eden Prairie, and I have not turned my heat on yet, but I've definitely pulled all of the blankets out of the cupboard.
Awesome. Thank you. So then John Howard and then Eric Ekman, you are on deck.
Good morning. I'm John Howard. I work for the City of Winona. I have not turned on my heat. I'm holding out as long as I can, but my office did turn on the heat, so I'm warmed up during the day.
Great. Ellen and then Eric. Or Ellen? No, Eric, then Ellen.
A bit of a tongue twister.
Yeah.
Yes, this is Eric Ekman, City of Golden Valley. I admit I did turn on the heat a couple days ago and kept it low, nice and low, but we got many people in the house here, so I didn't want to hear about it anymore.
Right? All right, Ellen and then Shane.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Ellen Brenna, City of Shoreview. I've also got Maria Fregis here as well with me. And no, I actually hadn't even really thought about turning on the heat until I read your deal breaker here, your icebreaker. But I'm also pregnant, so I've got a little bit of extra heat coming. So got some bonus there. Maria, did you turn on the heat?
We have not turned on the heat. Our mom says to use blankets, so that's what we're doing.
We're being very responsible. Good morning, everybody.
There you go. Awesome. Shane and then Allie. Shane, go ahead and unmute yourself and tell us who you are and if you have turned on your heat. All right, we'll skip Shane for now. Allie, and then Bill Kennedy, you're next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Allie. I work for the city of Inver Grove Heights, and I did not turn on my heat because I'm in an apartment, and I think my apartment is insulated enough that I haven't had to do that. So we'll see how long that lasts.
Awesome. All right, so Bill Kennedy and then Lauren.
Hi, this is Bill Kennedy from the city of Hackensack, and definitely turned on our heat because it was cold up here.
Fair. All right, Lauren, and then we'll give Shane another shot.
Hi, Lauren Jensen with the city of Rochester. We also live in an apartment, my sister and I, so we haven't personally done anything inside of our apartment, and I actually have my window open a crack because I love the cold, so.
All right, fair. Looks like we got in the chat. Shane's having some audio issues. So go ahead, that's cool, Shane. Shane is with Grandma Ray. Just, you can message us whether you turned your heat on or not. I'm guessing up there you did, Grandma Ray. Or you have a fireplace. Heat is on. The heat is on, yes. Did I miss anyone? I think I got everyone. Did I miss anyone? I think we got everybody. Well, quite a group here today. Thank you. All right. So let's move on. I'm going to turn it over right away to my colleague, Caitlin Bachman, who will talk about, give us an overview of citing considerations for EV charging stations. Caitlin.
Hello. Yeah, so if you recall from last week, we talked about just kind of a high level overview of charging stations. And so this week we get into a little bit more in the weeds, just looking at citing considerations and, you know, how to identify good locations in your community, good locations at the host site, and then I'll also cover some tips when you're thinking about installation, and then also give you some good resources to look at after the call. So without further ado, I just want to start out with giving you some information regarding installing locations in your community and what might be good locations to identify. So when we're thinking about site preference, there are different considerations for DC fast chargers and level 2. So when you're thinking about DC fast chargers, you want them to be located somewhere near a highway corridor or a busy road to entice people that are traveling to pull off and charge at your location. The goal is to get them back on the road as quickly as possible, so they're not going to be spending too much time in the area. Typical DC fast charger users will spend, I would say, up to a half hour charging at that location. So, you know, maybe locating it next to a place where they can grab a quick cup of coffee or something like that could be good, but otherwise don't expect them to stay in the area too long. When we look at level 2, that user is going to be spending anywhere from 2 to 4 hours, possibly more, at a public level 2 charger. And so for those ones, it's really important to locate them next to amenities where people can spend that duration of time and not get bored. So good examples for that include parks, theaters, libraries, hotels, downtown areas, other locations. If you're thinking about installing for employees, obviously workplaces are a good location for that. And then, you know, housing, multifamily, those can also be really good options. And those tend to be the locations where EV charging is lacking. And so if you have, you know, new development or redevelopment happening in your communities, those can be some really good options to think about putting in some charging to encourage those those people living in those multifamily dwellings to transition to electric. The next consideration here is proximity to power. So both DC fast charging and level 2, your goal is to reduce installation costs. And so the closer you can locate those stations next to an existing power source is going to be really effective in reducing your overall cost for installation. And so when you're looking at DC fast charger, that's going to be a higher power station, and so locating it near a transformer is probably going to be your best bet. This will help reduce installation costs such as cable trenching and other things associated with that. For level 2, there's a couple of different options here. If you're, let's say you're looking at a parking ramp, maybe you can mount it on a wall, and so you don't actually have to trench underground, but instead you can run the conduit above ground to a power supply. So that's an option. You'll also want to make sure that you have additional capacity in your breaker. So looking at 240 volt capacity there. You can also look for locations with less concrete. So sometimes with level 2, what we see is mounting it near a sidewalk, and then you can actually bore underneath the sidewalk and run conduit that way, so that you're not having to dig up a ton of concrete and trench through a parking lot. So those are just some tips there. As I kind of alluded to earlier, new development and redevelopment will be some really good locations to identify as you're thinking about where to locate charging stations. This is, going to be helpful for both DC fast charging and level 2, but it's really just going to help keep your installation costs down, because again, you're already ripping up the concrete, most likely, if you're redeveloping. And so you won't have to rip it up again. So it can just really help keep those costs down. And then the other tip I would offer you is that if you're already thinking about putting in charging stations, you might as well build in additional conduit for future chargers. So even if you're not putting in the chargers today, you can build in that conduit, which will reduce your costs in the future as, our transportation system is becoming more electric, and we have more need for that in the future. Some additional best practices here are installing at buildings and lots owned by you. So this will just make it a little bit easier, because you won't have to look for site hosts or enter into any site host agreements. Installing in larger lots can be helpful, because the stations will take up less of the entire lot. And I've heard, at least in greater Minnesota, this is a really important best practice, because not everyone has gone electric up there. And so there can be some greater tensions in greater Minnesota if those users start to see a lot of that parking lot become reserved only for electric vehicles, and then they don't have anywhere to park. So just something to keep in mind there. Lastly, looking for covered areas can help preserve your station from weather elements. So in Minnesota, we have some long winters here, and so preserving your station from a lot of snowfall will help keep your cord intact, because there won't be as much risk in having a snowplow run into it. Additionally, salt use tends to be high, so locating it farther away from where salt use is going to be high might help extend your station. So some resources here, just kind of going along with what I already covered. Everything that I covered was taken directly from our site selection guidelines on the Drive Electric Minnesota website, and it's driveelectricmn.org/charging-guidance. So I'll correct that before these slides go out. But we have an interactive Prezi tool on there, so you can actually look at these various things and get into a little bit more detail than what I covered today. And then there's also a downloadable checklist. So this is just a couple of screenshots from that Prezi tool to give you an idea of the level of detail that it gets into. And then this is that site selection guideline that you can download and print out. So after we've identified a good location in the community, the next consideration then is where to put it on the actual property. And so I did cover some of these best practices already, but you want to keep your costs down for any of these stations. And so when you're looking at public charging, you want to place it as close as possible to that power source. And so that might be toward the front of the building, that might be on the side of the building. Maybe you're able to connect it a little bit further back in the parking lot, wherever it is, you just want to kind of keep your costs down, which will benefit you. Another consideration is locating it in a visible area. So you want to make it easy for users to find so that people are actually using your station. And so sometimes, if you would put the station behind your building, not always going to be the easiest to find. And so consider putting it in the front or on the side of your building so it's easier to find. It'll also reduce vandalism because you're creating more visibility. And so that's just a natural good side effect there. If possible, consider locating it near the entrance because it can be a nice perk for EV drivers. Although I've also heard that if you put it in the front, then people that aren't EV drivers will tend to park there. And so, you'll want to make sure that you're putting out signage and striping those parking spaces and making it really clear that this space is reserved for EV drivers if you do locate it near the front, so that you don't get iced, which is internal combustion engine parking in that EV space. When you're looking at fleet charging, and all of these considerations for the most part are going to be related to level 2 charging. So again, placing it next to a power source will help keep your installation costs down. Locating it in a visible area, it'll just help those employees find the station so they know where to charge. And then if you do want to make sure that it's reserved for fleet charging, you might want to consider putting it in a gated area so that members of the public aren't using your station. But ultimately, it really depends on who you want to use the station. And if your fleet is not going to need it 100% of the time, maybe you do want to allow that station to be used by, other employees or members of the public. So just a consideration there. Workplace charging, again, I'm sounding like a broken record here, but placing the station as close as possible to the power source will reduce your installation costs. And then again, keeping it in a visible area, reducing vandalism and making it easier for users to find. So that's some additional tips there. When you're actually going to be installing it, so you've located a good place in the community, you've located a good place on the actual property, and now you're ready to install the station. So there's a few different considerations for public, fleet, and workplace charging that I'll cover today. So with public charging, if you are installing a lot of level 2s or a few DC fast chargers, it's going to be a large installation, and you'll want to make sure you're working with your utility so that they can offer you the best possible rate for that charging. And it also helps them manage that oncoming load. And so developing a good partnership with your utility is really important here. Additionally, you'll want to make sure that you secure any needed permits. You're all cities, so I'm sure you all know what the permits are in your city for electric charging stations. Normally, they are just an electric permit that you need, but occasionally, let's say you are installing a lot of DC fast chargers and you're going to put up a solar carport, well, then you might need a building permit. So I know all of you are more experts than I am on this topic, and so just want to help you think about needed permits prior to installation. The next step here is installing signage to direct traffic to the station. Again, you're just increasing visibility here and making it really clear that this space is reserved for electric vehicle chargers. So we have some examples that we can send in the follow-up when we send out the notes. Also, installing proper lighting. This is just, again, increasing visibility, reducing vandalism. So it's in a well-lit location, making users feel safe, even if they're using it at night. That can be important. You'll also want to consider building protection around that station. So this can look like, if you're putting it in a parking lot, you probably want to consider putting some bollards around the station. Typically we see 4 bollards around it, so it kind of forms a square. If you're putting it on the sidewalk, maybe you don't need those because the sidewalk acts as an additional barrier. Maybe you only need 2 bollards. So it really depends on where you are installing that station. Make sure you review your warranty documentation because this will be really important as malfunctions happen. So you'll want to know what is covered in that warranty, how long that warranty lasts, and also think about what other maintenance that station might need so that you're establishing a policy for that equipment usage and maintenance over time. For public, to increase visibility and make sure people are going to be able to find your site, register on plugshare.org and also the Alternative Fuels Data Center. So we'll get some information out on how to do that. And there's also more tips on the Drive Electric Minnesota website that cover this. Lastly, you'll want to test your network and payment equipment before you go live to make sure everything is working how you want it to be. Fleet charging, a lot of the same considerations here as with public charging. So I won't go too much into detail, although the one difference is going to be if you're looking to have that station reserved specifically for fleet, you probably don't want to put it on PlugShare because then you don't want the members of the public to use it. So that's really, as you can see, that's one of the main differences there. When you're thinking about workplace charging, again, a lot of the same considerations apply. Although for this one, one of the differences is you will probably want to register it on PlugShare if you want to encourage members of the public to use it when it's not being used by employees. So there are some different systems out there that would enable you to reserve the station during the day for employee use, and then in the evening, members of the public could use it. And you can also program the station, especially if you have a smart charging station, you can have it reserved during the day for free for employees. And then if you want to charge in the evening for members of the public to use it, you can. So that functionality does exist. The other thing you might want to consider is deploying a reservation system. And so there's some other options on the market that exist here. I know the stations at the Greenway building do have a reservation system in place. And so it requires employees to reserve that station for a set amount of time. And once that reservation is up, they have to move their vehicle to allow someone else to come in and charge. So it'll just help maximize those stations for as many EV drivers as possible. So that's the one consideration there that I wanted to highlight. You can find all of this information again on that driveelectricmn.org/charging-guidance. We have all of these checklists, so to speak, installation tips out there. And so you can click those drop downs and get the level of detail. We have it for public, fleet, and workplace. And then you can also download printable versions of these checklists. As you can see here, this is what the checklists look like. So some additional resources. There's Shift to Electric, and this one can be really helpful, you know, if you're looking for consulting and training information. You know, maybe you want to work with your utility, and so they do offer some consultancy for utilities as well. So that can be a really great partnership. If your utility in your city doesn't already have an EV program built up, Shift to Electric can help them with that. They also have a lot of great resources on multi-unit dwelling and workplace charging. And they have kind of a sister site, which is mudcharging.com, which has more information for condos and apartment buildings and additional resources for utilities. So again, just coming up with some additional session previews. So this session today talked about siting and installation. And the next session, we're going to dig into a little bit more detail on vendors and service, maintenance, best practices, lessons learned, that sort of thing. And our last session will focus on funding these stations and preparing for Volkswagen settlement RFPs. With that, I will open it up for any questions and turn it back over to Diana to moderate.
All right. So, anyone have questions? You can either chat it or unmute yourself and ask a question.
This is John. I have a question about insurance and whether it makes sense to buy if it's needed to have a policy, if it's going to be a public station, just for liability purposes.
Yeah, I actually don't have a great answer for that. I don't know what people typically do. So maybe there's somebody else on the call that actually has a station and could address that question.
Noah, do you have a thought about that? Do you know if you insured yours for the public one?
We do not have, not a direct policy, no.
Okay, other questions? We'll have some more time at the end for questions as well, but now we're going to turn over and have some case studies. You know, this is the part, you know, this is a peer cohort, so we try to share information and resources generally about the topic, and then we always love it when we can have cities that will share with us their experience, and you can hear right from them and ask them questions. So grateful to have Noah Silver from the city of Edina. He's the electrician there. So we're gonna get nerdy about electricity. But I asked Noah if he would share about their experience with the installation and kind of how they decided, you know, what were the considerations for choosing a site, you know, did they connect with utility, what resources did they use? So I'll turn it over to Noah.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. And you've got the slides, right, ready to roll. So, yeah, so I just put together a couple of iterations. And again, I'm focusing more on the actual install and then some of the operational things that have been observed and whatnot. So I have the next slide has some bullet points. A lot of this was covered, so that was a really nice comprehensive view by Caitlin. So one thing about the existing parking spaces and the clearance, a lot of times there's competition for getting as many parking spaces as possible in an area. And with EV, that has to be let go of a little bit because you need extra spacing so people can get in between the vehicles, plug in and access the charging stations. So that's something to keep in consideration. Signs and pavement markings were already covered. I do have some pictures with examples, and also protecting stations from vehicle. One thing that I'll also hit on here, I think that's important, is cord management, which will show up here in a couple slides. And then into the more nerdy stuff, the electrical, as Diana put it. Yeah, so the electrical load. How many stations are you putting in? What is the power requirement for those stations? And don't assume that you can just add them to your existing electrical service that you may have in the area. There may be some challenges there. Maybe that service does not have the capacity to handle that extra load. And also, again, which was covered, also how far away is it? And I have some examples coming up where I can talk a little bit more about that, because it may make sense to not use the service of the building and maybe install a whole new service out at the site, closer to the site, depending on how many you're adding. And then it was talked a little bit about networks. I think it's important to note that networks, whether you control your charging station by having it networked or not, obviously a non-networked, more simpler charging station is going to be a lot less expensive. But networking it gives you that control access, monitoring the use, possibly adding fees, and building that data so you know how it's being used as well, and possible greenhouse gas savings. So with that network, that's I think a key thing to think about. But also with that network comes the cost, an annual fee to be connected to that network. In addition to that, someone in the city is going to have to be the administrator. Someone needs to actually, you know, commission, decide, and input into that platform, that networking, those parameters that Caitlin talked about. If you're going to require reservations, if you're going to have schedules, if you're going to restrict use, and that sort of thing. So I just want to share a couple slides now that show some installs we have in Edina. So the next slide, this was our first vehicle charging station that we put in. And this is in the 50th and France Business District. And it's in our north parking ramp off of Market Street. And here, because of the design of the ramp, we went with two 90-degree spaces. So we were able to achieve that clearance for people to easily access the station. But also that you can see the station is protected well from vehicles without having to add bollards. Not saying a car couldn't hit it, but it'd be very difficult. And another thing to note about it is the cord management. I feel it's highly recommended to consider a station that has cord management like this. You can see the cords are up out of the way. Somebody brought up possible needing insurance. This removes trip hazards and tangling of the cord. The next slide shows our City Hall project. And again, the previous slides were really well done. We had a larger project in our parking lot of redoing parts of the parking lot, relocating some accessible parking spaces, and adding a speed table, which you can kind of see in the background of the picture on the right, to slow vehicles down and remove any curbs for pedestrians crossing, and increase the sight line as you're coming around that curve from the street. And so what you see here is our public station. We decide on the right side there, you can see also a white one. The white one is our fleet vehicles, and the one on the right is for public use. And we decided with the dual port to have one station be for accessible parking and the other one general parking. And this is available to the public, just as stated. We went with ChargePoint Network. It's visible to the public, and we have no restrictions as far as time of use, day, any of that. It's completely open. But I will say, and I can expand more on questions on this later, we did have abuse. And so we went through council, and to help self-police ours, they are free for the first 2 hours and 15 minutes to the public. After that, you get charged $6 an hour. And I picked that amount to make it completely, there's no point in somebody staying plugged in longer. And we have seen that helped self-police it a lot. We had not a lot, but a significant amount of abuse of people plugging in, even overnight, residents plugging in that north ramp overnight, and that vanished almost overnight when we put that fee system on there. The next slide shows our fleet system, and again, as stated in the slides before, this was a larger project, and this is phase 1, and we plan to expand it. So you see the two slabs further down in the picture. Those are for 2 additional dual port charging stations in phase 2. Now, instead of bollards, one thing to note here in this side view shows it better than the last slide. For protection, we put the stations back from the curb. They still have plenty of cable to reach the vehicles at various points of connection. And we put the curb stops, the parking stops, down on the pavement. Snow removal was a thought, but at the end of the day, we just wanted to avoid having those bollards, especially right up front at our City Hall. The next slide shows what I was talking about, cord management. Our very, very first charging station was mounted on a pillar in our Public Works vehicle storage garage for our very first vehicle, the Nissan Leaf you see there. And if you consider a less expensive charging station where you have the hook and you expect people to coil up, even in our non-public area with employees, it doesn't happen. So you can see what the end result is. The cord's laying on the ground that could prematurely wear the cord or damage it or be a trip hazard. So that's why I really think about that part of it. The next slide. I wanted to show what you could possibly be getting into. So at the City Hall location, we planned out for the future to add up to 10 dual port level 2 charging stations. And so that would be 20 individual ports. And the electrical load on that, after doing the load calculation, would require a 600 amp 3-phase 208 service. That might be a little eggheady there, but the end result is for us to run the power from our existing City Hall service, it would have cost almost double versus just having a brand new service put out in the corner of the parking lot. And so what you see here is the transformer for that many chargers required by Excel. In addition to it, our service cabinet, which is the anodized bronze cabinet. And to put a scale on it, this anodized bronze cabinet is 7 feet tall and 8 feet wide and about 30 inches deep. And I think that's my last slide. If you flip to the last one, that was just a general overview of just some of the details, and I'm happy to answer any questions about any part of load calcs or anything like that. Thank you.
Oh, please, load calcs. Thank you so much, Noah. We're going to have another, Ellen from Shoreview is going to speak for a few minutes as well, but I just wanted to stop for a second. If anybody has any clarification questions for Noah, we'll have plenty of time for question and answer, but if you have some particular questions for Noah, thank you for, the pictures really help kind of drive the understanding of kind of how you situate them. And that was interesting to see the curb stops there. So is there any concern that a plow might take those out?
We talked about it, and we just feel that the way they plow that area, they can stop short of it. And yes, it will require some more detailed snow removal there. But again, we just wanted to go that route versus Bollards. There's so much to touch on this if we had days, right?
and just so, you know, what was the big, you know, why did you not want to have Bollards there?
Well, again, to protect them. So, you know, for vehicles accidentally rolling into them, you know, all these people in cities know your street lights, your traffic signals, anything like that out in parking lots, road, they never get hit by vehicles, right? You know, so it's just, you really want to, because these stations are not cheap. And if appropriate, you know, those charging stations I showed on state contract range between $4,500 and $5,500 a piece. So, you know, you really want to avoid damage to them.
Right, but I guess I was asking, you know, you didn't want Bollards to protect them.
Correct.
Is it because they looked ugly, because you were worried people would hit those?
A couple reasons. One, just the aesthetics right up front at our building, and then also that the infrastructure in the ground there was really busy, and the clearances as well. It could have been done, but we just felt like we were trying to cram too much in there and wanted to have it more open.
All right. Do other people have questions?
I have a question. This is Caitlin. So this kind of gets into our session 3 a little bit, but hopefully you're willing to answer it. I noticed on your public stations that one was ChargePoint, but it looked like the fleet ones were actually green lots powered by Shell. And so I was just wondering why you went with 2 different vendors instead of keeping the same vendor.
Yeah, so the former sustainability coordinator in the city wanted to try for fleet the Green Lots platform, which is their Sky software, and supposedly it's in development with keeping in mind more utilities about possible peak type events and things like that, and time of use and demand. So that is why. That's remained to be seen. But with starting out with one station, we figured we didn't really have anything to lose to try a different platform. And then I've been comparing the two and providing that data to the city, you know, and we'll see if that's the direction we go or not. I mean, ChargePoint has the capability to do fleet as well, along with public. So we just kind of wanted to check it out.
Great. Any other questions? Awesome. Thank you so much, Noah.
Yep, no problem.
And then we want to switch to the next slide. So now we've asked Ellen, and she's pictured in this picture. She's the one standing, touching the charger there in Shoreview. Asked her to answer some questions because they had their installation really recently this summer. Again, you know, thinking about, you know, the citing considerations, everything that we've, you know, talked about, you know, kind of what were your criteria or considerations when choosing a location? Did you involve community partners? Did you connect with your utility? Kind of what kinds of resources did you use? And kind of what would you, you know, what's a missing resource or any tips for peers?
Thanks, Diana, and thank you, Noah. That was a really excellent presentation. I should have stepped up my game here and included
It's
some
all
pictures.
good.
But I'm glad, Diana, that you've got this one up so you guys can see sort of where we've placed it. And at least one of our chargers, we actually have 2. They're both level 2 dual port charging stations. That's the first one for the city. They're for public use. We, unlike a lot of cities, including Edina, we don't have a downtown area, so we're almost entirely residential. So this is located at our Community Center City Hall complex, which I don't know if you guys are familiar, but it's at Highway 96 and Victoria Street. So it's a pretty, you know, accessible place along the highway there, and there's also a public library just, you know, just off to the left there behind, or out of the shot. So there's things for people to do, which was part of our consideration because they are level 2 chargers. We looked at a level 3 fast charger, but the cost was prohibitive. The city paid for this out of pocket, so we couldn't do something like that, unfortunately. But we did the other considerations besides mostly, you know, were there things for people to do? Was this a place that people were going to be able to see it? We wanted to install these as sort of an example to our residents and visitors to our community center, just to see, look, you know, there are plenty of people with EVs. This is something that's accessible to you. It's something that you could purchase and use yourself. We do have it there in the middle of this median, so that was kind of my citing consideration. I wanted it so that in case we did get some of those parking spots iced, we did only block off 4 of them on one side, the side that's facing the charger. But people can still access the charger from the back side on the other side of that median. And I have seen a couple people doing that already since they've been put in June. So if you happen to pull in on the wrong side, you can still plug in and use it. And it works fine with our cord management kits, which we got for snow maintenance reasons mostly. We don't have any Bollards up right now. I am considering it. We've got a pretty good curb there to hopefully prevent vehicles from running into the stations themselves, but I'm concerned about our snow management. We'll see how it goes this winter. We do have city crews plow the parking lots there, and I asked them to hand shovel this area, but hopefully that's not too much work for them as they get going. So most of our considerations were accessibility and visibility, and you know, in a place where people were going to be stopping by for a couple hours of a fitness class, something like that, go to the library for a children's course, and maybe plug in and charge for an hour or so while you're doing that. We did this, I mentioned it briefly last week, we did put these charging stations in as part of a partnership with Cummins, a local business, and also GPI, but in terms of citing criteria, we didn't really work with any community partners to decide this. At the time that we were putting them in, our community center was undergoing a renovation, and that included part of our parking lot. And so our city manager and the landscape designer on that project were the ones who decided on the best place to put these within our parking lot. We knew we wanted them at the community center, but we have an upper parking lot and a lower parking lot, and it's pretty big. You can see it kind of expands to the school district building behind and the library on the other side. So there were a lot of places within that parking lot that we could have put them. Where we elected to was right in front of the upper level entrance to our community center. So it's not the pool area. If you guys are familiar with our facility here, it's closer to City Hall's main entrance. So it's also accessible to people coming for permits and things like that. And it's more visible from the highway as well. So people can kind of see those, and they're available on all of our maps as well, the plug share and charge point. We did connect with Excel before we did this, just to make sure we had enough capacity, like Noah mentioned. Luckily for us, our community center is giant. We have a lot of electricity that goes through that every day. We've got 2 pools, we've got massive fitness centers. We have a generator that can back up everything to full capacity if necessary. And so they said that we were fine to put in additional conduit. We ran conduit from the building underground to this median, and we ran enough to install an additional 4 charging stations in the future if necessary. That was another consideration, was we did want a place where we could keep those going, you know, add more if these ones became full. And that maple tree in the photo there is actually very unhealthy. It's got maple decline. It's not doing very well. So we do anticipate removing that in the future, so that won't be a problem if we have to continue to run conduit a little bit further down and some electricity to get more stations put in there. Let's see here. We didn't use Drive Electric Minnesota resources for this particular portion of the project. Like I said, it was sort of decided for me. yes, you can put these in and they're going to go here. But I certainly did use the resources for other aspects of this project. Absolutely. And one of the questions Diana posed was, do I wish that I would have had any other resources? Was there anything missing? And I certainly don't think so. But something that I do wish that I had done is maybe to drive around and take a look at some other cities' installations. For example, the ones from Edina that Noah just showed us. And I know that there's several others around Minneapolis and St. Paul and the metro area to take a look at. I did see some photos available in some of the resources, but I didn't actually go out there to take a look at them myself. And I think that could have just been helpful in terms of how are they protected, how are they marked, and you know, is there pavement markings, are there signs? Currently we have signs up, that's not in that picture, but we do have 4 signs, one for each of the lots that we're blocking off. And we do plan to do pavement markings, although that is sort of up in the air. We've got a finicky city manager who would like to pick a particular design, and so we're working towards that as well for aesthetic reasons. And then, yeah, any tips? I mean, Caitlin really covered that in her presentation. We really wanted a place where people were going to be for a while so that they could use it, and we thought that this was a good spot for it. We've had, you know, it's fewer usage or users than I was hoping for, but we've been pretty well shut down since these went in, and so I'm not that surprised. And even with the minor openings that we've had at the community center, there's still been about 15 people using the stations, 15 individual users and drivers, and so the word is getting out. And really, we haven't gotten to the point where people are abusing the fact that there are free charging stations. But I will admit that I was thinking they were going to get more use than they are. So hopefully we can get this pandemic under control and get sort of more usage out of them in the future. Yeah, and then maybe install some more. So we'll see. They're working great so far for us. There's a couple of city staff members that use them, and then some visitors who have, you know, early morning fitness classes, and hopefully they will hold up with the winter season, and we can get going again in the spring. So that's all I've got. If anybody has any questions.
Great. Thanks so much, Ellen. You'll have to send me pictures of the signage now that you have those up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Questions? And this, you know, the fact that you were able to put it in turf, I think it was in our VW webinar, webinar that we had in the summer, and probably others, but, you know, turf is your friend. If you can put a charging station, you know, this is an ideal way to do it. You put it in the turf there between the parking spots. You might not need the bollards then. You're not breaking up concrete. There's, you know, a number of advantages. I love this, the access from both sides. There's a lot of advantages for this. And so, and again, this is all site specific. So depending on what your parking lot looks like, you know, there's, you know, different options. So it's nice to see a couple of different variations with the cities that we're able to share with us today. So thank you, Ellen. Do you folks have questions? These are those are the questions that we were asking. All right. So now is the part where we have more of a discussion, and especially, you know, looking to talk to folks that maybe don't already have charging stations. You know, this cohort is really about helping get you to action. So really helping you think about, you know, how do you start moving forward? So kind of given what you've heard about the locations or the citing considerations, like what kinds of locations come to your mind in your community? And, you know, what are the charging gaps in your community as well? You know, we touched on that a bit. So please jump in. This is the discussion part. And maybe we could make it so that the presentation is just part of the screen and we can see people's faces again on the side. I'm lost without seeing the people on the side. I don't know, is that on my own view option? Oh, there we go. That's it. Thank you. So, all right, folks, so hearing this, do you have locations in your community that come to mind?
Diana, may I quickly share?
Yeah.
You know, that first charging station I showed in the ramp is in our 50th and France business district. And that area, because of all the businesses around, I didn't know what we would see for usage. We were averaging before COVID 60 to 80 sessions a day at that one station, and had between 35 and 45 unique drivers every month. So it was getting used I feel pretty significantly, you know, and so and it's a great selling point for those areas in the business districts to where they might even chip in, because it's proven with our data that it gets people there with electric vehicles and they're spending some time in the district. Just wanted to throw that out there.
And did you say 65 to 80 charges per day?
I might have made a mistake there. I meant a month, excuse me.
Okay.
So 60 to 80 a month.
Dang.
And no, 60 to 80 a month and 35 to 45 unique drivers a month is what we were consistently averaging pre-COVID. Now it's down to maybe 10 sessions a month because everything's basically closed. Picking up a little.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. That's really helpful. And I know we talked, we know that, you know, Red Wing did their charger in a municipal owned parking lot that was in a business district, and they had you know, that is a similar thing, really trying to, you know, utilize that. Good
Diana?
location. Yeah.
This is Melissa from the city of Red Wing. Just to kind of dovetail on that. So we don't have nearly that type of usage as Edina does, but we do have a sustainability commissioner who does keep track of all of the data. And 95% of the users that do come to Red Wing to use our charger are from out of town. So it's definitely a great draw to our community.
That's great. I'm guessing that's Bill.
Yes, of course.
Great city commission member who is the EV guru and cheerleader down in Red Wing. You're really lucky to have Bill. Yeah, so that's interesting, because I think that was a really big question about, you know, finding out, are the users in Red Wing, you know, people from the community or people coming from outside, because of course you're more of a tourist town on, you know, the river and 61 there. So that's good to know. And I'm sure that makes the businesses really happy that it's bringing in people from out of town. So Anne has a question in the chat. At what point do you invite an actual installer in to provide their perspective on your site choice and best options? We have minimal staff to plan. Caitlin, or maybe even Noah? I mean, you know, the hard part is in Edina. Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, what I was going to say is in Edina, we're internal. I'm the licensed master electrician for the city, and we have licensed in-house electricians. So I did the initial load calculations, kind of what you're talking about, and worked with Excel to get our new service and verified whether it made sense to come out of our building or do a new service. And then from that point, due to my time constraints, I worked with SCH to actually do the actual specs so they could go out for open bid. And I won't go too deep into the weeds, but I put very specific things in there because it was open bid for down to the kind of wire insulation. And so there are a lot of details like that. But again, if you work with a firm like that, like SCH, or reach out to reputable licensed contractors, they can help you with some of the initial stuff. But we only hired out the infrastructure due to restraint on the amount of labor I have available, but the actual install and commissioning of the charging stations we did in-house.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know if Caitlin or somebody else, because again, you know, the Difference Marine is a very, very small community, very few staff. And so, you know, at one point, I don't know, Caitlin, if you have thoughts about, would it be advisable to bring an actual installer in to kind of get some perspective?
Yeah, the thing I was going to add is, you know, if you're looking at a level 2, any electrician can install that. So, you know, maybe it's you want to get some different bids, or you're considering some different site locations, and so you want an electrician to, you know, provide bids for a couple of different sites. I think you can bring them in at any point. You know, I don't know that there's a certain point in time that like you need to bring them in, but obviously if you're considering it down the road, it could be useful to get that information at any point. And I'm not sure how long bids stand for. I would assume, you know, they probably have they're good for like 30 or 45 days or something like that. But it could at least give you an idea of the type of installation cost that you'd be looking at. Obviously, if you're looking at a DC fast charger, that's going to be more expensive. And so at that point, you'd want to involve a company like, let's say, Zeph Energy that has experience installing DC fast charging stations because they are a little bit more involved. Additionally, if you're looking at, let's say, like multiple level 2 stations instead of just one dual port station, that's going to require some additional planning. So it can be good to involve your utility, maybe reach out to them first and see what advice they have in terms of electricians in your area. They might, you know, have some additional rates that they could provide for several level 2 stations. And so I think anytime you're considering a more complicated installation like that, it's always good to involve your utility as one of the first partners.
I would completely agree with that. If you're gonna be looking at installing a couple of level 2 chargers, any rep contractor can help you out with that to determine the loads and stuff. I won't rehash that. But yeah, if you're, you know, that's exactly what we did before we even contacted SCH for the specific designing, because we're projecting out 10 dual port stations at that location. I worked with Excel in the very beginning, who's our utility, and verified the load calculations and got a quote from Excel. What would it cost for them to bring a transformer and power to that location? So that once that was determined, then we were able to move forward with, okay, now it's feasible to do it this way. We're gonna contact our firm now, SCH, to do the specific design for our open bid documents.
Great. Thank you for that. So Annie from St. Louis Park is, you know, question going back to Edina's presentation, is there an industry recommended ratio of ADA accessible spaces to none?
I am not aware of any.
And maybe Chris could chime in a little bit. I mean, so we know that with the Volkswagen money, and part of, again, the reason that we're starting this cohort off with the pieces around the meetings around charging is so that you guys will be in better position perhaps to apply for Volkswagen settlement dollars for the level 2 charging funding that will come out this fall yet. And there are specific ADA requirements for the Volkswagen settlement chargers that are funded. And I know Chris did a lot with that. So I don't know if Chris, you want to chime in and say something about it.
Yeah, so the MPCA for their projects requires that one station per dual head, or one parking stall per dual headed charger is ADA accessible. So if you have one charger that's, take for example, Shoreview's charger, if they, for one of their chargers, the dual headed chargers, if they had 4 spaces kind of striped off on either side of the median, hypothetically, the MPCA would require that at least one of those parking stalls is ADA compliant. So at least one, I guess, is the standard that the MPCA is encouraging. Actually, not encouraging, requiring for their projects.
And You know, this is probably a zoning ordinance question as well. I think you could probably provide this guidance in your zoning ordinances if you know, wanted to require a certain amount in your city. I haven't heard of any other cities that are doing this specifically on ADA compliant to non-ADA compliant electric vehicle charging stations, but I know a lot of cities, St. Louis Park included, does have a city ordinance that indicates a certain percentage of each parking lot must be you know, EV ready, or, you know, have at least a certain amount of level 1 charging stations or level 2 charging stations. And so I think you could take that one step further if you wanted and indicate, you know, a certain percentage need to be ADA compliant.
Absolutely, that's a really good point. And we'll, you know, we are going to focus probably in the winter after the holidays, maybe January, on EV-ready standards for private development. And so, you know, we'll go deeper into some of that. And sort of hot off the presses this summer, the B3 benchmarking guidelines that y'all are so familiar with for your city-owned buildings also established an EV-ready guideline this summer. And so there's some guidelines as far as, you know, how many, you know, for buildings, you know, how many, you know, spaces should you have for EV charging, how much conduit, how many stations you should actually have, and has a number of different kind of guidance and performance criteria that we can share then as well. And I'm happy to share it sooner than that. You don't have to wait, but you know, that is something also that came down the pike this summer. So that's exciting to have that as part of the kind of building guidelines. Other questions?
Related to the questions that you see on the screen here, the second question in particular, I just wanted to provide some additional guidance or thoughts here. So a lot of you that have charging stations have talked about utilization, and you know, obviously the goal is to make sure your station is being utilized. And so before thinking about installing at a certain location, it can be really useful to hop on PlugShare or AFDC and look at the existing charging stations in your community and really see, like, are there locations where you don't have infrastructure that would make a great addition. And so, you know, the goal is to be complementary rather than putting all of your stations in, you know, one particular building of your community. And so the more you can spread out that infrastructure, you know, at different destinations, at different apartments and things like that, then you're encouraging more and more people in your community to drive electric.
Absolutely. So anybody else have thoughts about, you know, where there are gaps or, you know, places in your community that you're thinking about? What would make sense after the conversation here? I know that Maureen has been thinking that the general store is the spot that is was most ideal. I know in the past that was the thinking. All right, let's go to the next. Again, we're just trying to kind of get you thinking about this and, you know, getting you prepped and ready. So are there any multifamily buildings or new construction that might be a good fit for, you know, location for chargers? So as we talked about, that is going to be a really, really big need. You know, those garages might not be equipped. So if you have multifamily buildings or new construction that are good locations, anyone want to jump in? This is so much easier when we're in person. I can see your faces and your body language. All right, let's go to the next slide. I think we have at least one more question. So, you know, letting us know, like, are there resources that you need to help you with your next steps? And we're here to help you. And there might be resources that you're looking for that we know where to find, or if there's a resource that just doesn't exist, you know, perhaps we can try to figure out how that can happen.
So this is Annie.
Go ahead, Leslie. Oh, go ahead, Annie.
Thanks. So I'm just wondering, we are thinking about putting chargers in some public parks around St. Louis Park, specifically next to multifamily buildings. And I'm wondering, along with that, this is kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but if there are resources that might be out there already that can help communicate about chargers specifically to multifamily buildings, and what kind of resources there are to just help get people familiar and let them know the resources there, and things like that.
That's you mean just letting the people that live in the multifamily housing know that there's a charger nearby?
Yeah, exactly. And how that might look a little different from other communications we've done just when it's gone up so far in city lots, like next to City Hall, things like that, and how that communication might be different.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, my initial instinct, because I'm old, I would go old school with like flyers at the building, or, you know, see if there's, do they have resident meetings that, you know, somebody could bring it up or you could present, or, you know, talking to the landlord about their communications to the residents. You know, obviously you're going to put it on PlugShare, but, you know, if you don't drive an EV and you're not looking for a plug, you wouldn't know it's there. But I think with some of those situations, you want to let those residents know that this is here, and so they might then start considering, you know, it might erase another barrier for them to consider an electric vehicle. So I don't know if others want to jump in, but I would go old school to the, you know, right directly to the building and management, and you know, see what the communications channels are within the building.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. The other thing I would suggest is working with that landlord to find out the utility that services that building, because then you can partner with the utility to actually include information about the electric vehicle charging station, as well as, you know, education about how to switch to electric vehicles. You know, maybe that utility has programs available such as rebates, or other things specific to residents, and you could actually work with that utility to include something in those residents' bills, in their next bills. And so, you know, they get mailings all the time, whether it's coming from email or actual mail, and so that can be a great partnership to work with that utility.
Yeah, that's great.
Great. Leslie, did you want to share something?
Yeah, so I know that originally before I got here, we had looked at putting in our charging station at the general store. Now that our town is having the main road reconstructed, so kind of everything's open for up in the air.
Yeah.
And we've looked at a lot more possible locations, including along the main street, a little further away. And we were looking at a spot that was under a street light. Does a street light have electrical that is something that could be tied into if there isn't a building nearby?
Yeah, and I maybe Caitlin can jump in too, but, you know, one thing that we've heard people talk about is simply, you know, putting in even, you know, one, you know, some of them have a 110 outlet right on them. So that's obviously, you know, a trickle charge. It's not a level 2. I don't know the capability for a level 2 in conjunction with a street light, but I don't know if Caitlin, if you have more information about that, or perhaps our electrical expert on the meeting today, Noah.
Yeah, my thought is, you know, ultimately it's going to come down to the electric load. And so what load would the electric vehicle charging station require? And what is the capacity that exists? And so there might not be additional capacity to pull off of that electric light, but there might be. And so ultimately, I think that's a utility question to ask them.
Typically, the way street lighting systems are designed, it's most likely not an option as far as directly from the light or that branch circuit that feeds the light. There is a slim chance, depending on the electrical service that feeds that street lighting system, that possibly it might have the capacity to add one, but it's probably not. It would be where I would lean to.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. All right. Next slide. I think we're getting close. Additional questions that you have regarding citing generally? Anyone?
Can I go back to the person who just answered and ask a follow-up?
Yeah, Noah. Mm-hmm.
Since the street is being torn up in that area and a lot of road work is being done, is that something that Excel might be able to work with or add capacity at that time? And given that there is already electrical there, because there is a street light there, is that?
I would definitely reach out to Excel, and I can connect you with folks. Have you guys done Partners in Energy? You haven't done that, have you?
No, we haven't.
Okay. So I would connect with Excel directly and ask them. I mean, they might be very interested in talking to you all about that, because they are heavily investing into electric vehicles and have a number of different programs and pilots underway right now. So I would definitely reach out to them to see if that is an option to, amp up, if you will, some of the services along the road, because I think a lot of people see Marine as a tourist area. There's a lot of folks that come there. It might be a really ideal location for a charger. So I would definitely touch base with Excel and start conversations to see what options are there.
I had looked at the Excel website and it looked like they were focusing on fleet vehicles. Is there a program name for something that's more for visiting and not fleet?
They are really focusing on the fleets for that pilot, for that particular pilot, but I would still reach out to them because they are also, I think, just really interested in the deployment of electric vehicles generally. And so I would reach out to them, and I can provide name or information for you guys as well. Yvonne Pfeiffer is the person I mostly work with. She's on the Metro Cert Steering Committee, but Tammy Gunderzig with Partners in Energy is doing a lot of work around some of the EVs as well. There's a number of different folks, but we can put you in touch with people. All right. Next slide. Perfect. So Ellen, you might, I don't know if Ellen's still on, but you might recognize this picture. So just a reminder, our next meeting is next week. We are, I'm blanking on the topic now. What are we talking about next week?
Vendors.
Maybe Caitlin will jump.
And
vendors, that's right. Sorry. Vendors, vendor options, maintenance, those kinds of things with regard to charging stations. National Drive Electric Week is coming up, September 26th through October 4th. And Caitlin and I actually co-chair the Communication and Outreach Committee for Drive Electric Minnesota. And we are launching a social media campaign called I Drive Electric, or I Road Electric, or I Ride Electric, if you ride on electric transit buses or whatever, encouraging people to look for this frame on Facebook and post a picture of themselves with their EVs. Something that I do frequently, selfies with my car, and post those during Drive Electric Week to really show the number of people, different people, different communities, and different vehicles that are out there as we celebrate Drive Electric Week nationally. So, I'll send some more information to you all. We have a toolkit. You can share this on your city websites or maybe in some social media to encourage people in your community that are driving electric to participate in the campaign. We really want to see as many as we can. My crazy, audacious goal is to have one picture from every county in Minnesota now that we know we have a registered vehicle in every county. It's going to be a stretch, but that's okay. We like stretch goals. I hope that you can join us and share this information and encourage people to post their pictures. So I think that is it. I don't know that we have any other slides. Oh, there's me. If you need to get a hold of me, that's how to get a hold of me. Thank you all for being here, and thank you especially to our presenters, Noah and Alan. We really appreciate you being on. And so thank you so much all, and we will see you next week. Bye, everyone.